Hello and welcome to the cut contents of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. This list is going to be ranked from most important changes to the least important changes, in my opinion of course. Let's start off with the biggest cut content from The Sands of Time, which was actually a boss called Griffin. Yes, the same Griffin from Warrior Within was actually supposed to be in The Sands of Time, and not as an unimportant boss. The original script showed that the Griffin would have played a massive role in the story and would have been a reoccurring boss for the prince to fight. The first appearance of the Griffin is within a vision. We see the Griffin lowering the hourglass into the hourglass room with the vizier standing there supervising the operation. We see something very similar in The Sands of Time. Instead of the Griffin carrying the hourglass, we actually see vultures carrying the hourglass around. And in a later vision, we see the vizier and his guards taking the hourglass to the hourglass room. The first actual encounter with the Griffin was going to be when we crossed the bridge just before the baths. When crossing the bridge, Pharaoh and Prince would have been attacked by the Griffin, which would have broken the bridge with its wing. This would have separated Pharaoh and Prince. Prince would have fought the Griffin and won after the Griffin flew away. Prince would be rewarded with a vision from this. The next encounter would have been just before entering the Tower of Dawn after the courtyard. Once again, Griffin would attack us on the bridge and send us flying back into the courtyard. Prince would again defeat the Griffin, but this would not be their final encounter. The final scene with Griffin would take place on top of the Tower of Dawn rooftops. In-game, Pharaoh fights sand generals here, but in the original script she would have fought off the Griffin. Prince would climb up the ladder, which would distract Pharaoh. Griffin would seize this opportunity to hit her with a mighty swing that creates a hole in the rooftops which she falls through. The game actually follows the script on how she actually dies. However, instead of Prince fighting off sand generals, he has a final fight with the Griffin and finally defeating him. Whilst the Griffin was removed from the main game, he was actually kept in the GBA and N-Gage ports. The N-Gage port is very strange. The final boss is still the Vizier, but he transforms into what seems to be the Griffin. Whatever it is not what the original vision for the Griffin was. In the GBA port, we fight the actual Griffin, who fights with poison and fireballs, unlike in Warrior Within, where only physical attacks are used. You can also see Prince sporting his old beta design, but we will get onto that a bit later. This really sheds a light onto why Griffin felt so randomly placed in Warrior Within. I guess they couldn't flesh out the model and animations for the Griffin in time for the release of Sands of Time. The only footage we have of the Griffin looks super jank, and instead of throwing out all the work the devs did, they put the creature in the next game. And if we are being honest, Warrior Within combat is far more suited for the boss anyway. There were actually many animals planned for the Sands of Time. I already mentioned the Griffin, but tigers were also featured quite prominently throughout the trailers for the game, but are completely missing in the final game. The trailer we received at E3 showed Prince fighting off a white Bengal tiger. This actually takes up quite a lot of the trailer, which shows they were definitely intended early on. Later in the Sand Creatures trailer, we see multiple designs of the tigers and actual in-game animations for them. The original script details that we would have fought them off in the zoo section of the game. This would have been an awesome inclusion, as the beetles and vultures we find in the zoo are not very fun enemy types. In Warrior Within we do fight spiked beasts though, which I guess could have used the code originally meant for the tigers in the Sands of Time. Yanis Malak detailed that production was extremely tight. The original intent for the game was for areas to have complicated contextual enemies. However, due to final levels taking so long to deliver, a lot of the enemies had to be developed and coded on placeholder maps, such as just a basic floor. So creating contextual enemies such as animals in a zoo would have been cost inefficient, so they had to be cut. There are a few cut enemies that we know of. In the Sands Beast promotional video, we can see many early designs that never made it into the final game, and some designs that were changed into the enemies we see now. Archers were originally meant to be a big part of the game, even being fully modelled out as shown by these screenshots. It seems a lot of resources went into developing this enemy, so the last minute cut doesn't make much sense. We do however see their return in the two fronts through the Scythian archers. Another cut enemy we see is this cut swordsman, that we actually see gameplay of. This gameplay has Prince sporting his beta outfit, so it must have been an incredibly early build. This early concept art shows what seems to be a sand creature with angelic wings commanding the rest of the sand creatures. This concept would later be put in the Forgotten Sands with the Summoners, which also command over other sand creatures. Here's a concept art of an enemy we have no information about. This looks like art done by Kai Nguyen, judging by his other works on Sands of Time. This enemy type is interesting as it looks like they would have used their claws to fight instead of a weapon. At one point the game was so big that the team considered splitting the game into two parts as detailed by Jordan Mechner. At first the team came up with the idea of slicing the game into two halves. Much like Quentin Tarantino split Kill Bill into 2 separate films, the first half was going to come out in the fall, and then the second half next year. Blames Mechner, who wanted to ensure the cuts didn't destroy the integrity of the story he had laboured on for months. Eventually though, the idea of splitting the game was dismissed. If the game was split in half, we could have never gotten Warrior Within, as that game came out a year after The Sands of Time did. Yanis Millet explained that instead of cutting out story elements, the team chose to cut levels that were very early in production or not up to a high level of quality. Speaking of which, a lot of levels were cut from the final game. Some of these levels were even fully modelled out. One of the cut levels was actually the foundry we see in Warrior Within. This makes sense since it is a puzzle level which Warrior Within actually lacks a lot of. Another of these cut levels was a sort of baths level. We see something similar in this concept art. Another cut level was this marketplace level which was actually fully modelled out. There's a small scene in the E3 trailer that possibly depicts the marketplace, but there's so little shown it's hard to tell. Here are a bunch of cut levels that we know little of. The Prince went through many design changes initially. The team were definitely originally going for the 1001 Arabic Nights aesthetic, which is something the original Mechner games did with Prince of Persia and Broderbund did with Prince of Persia 3D. Later on, the designs changed to make Prince look more like a Persian warrior, and the team seemed to settle on this white and red design. This white and red design stayed in production for a really long time, even making it to some early builds of the game. However, later into production, possibly after the engine was refined, which I will go into later, Prince's design changed to blue and white, which we see today. However, even the blue and white colors we see today went through some design changes. Originally, Prince's hair color was very black. Today we see it as brown. An early concept was for Prince to have an arm with sand markings. The early idea may have been for Prince's arm to be infected with sands, much like in the Two Thrones. Later iterations may have changed it to have Prince's arm light up only during enemy absorptions, as seen in the E3 trailer. Much like Prince, Farah went through many design changes. She originally was going to have a focus on a green and yellow color to contrast Prince's white and red. The design was later changed to the red we see today, which contrasts Prince's blue. She originally had blue eyes, which is seen in her early models and even in the PS2 demos. Later it was changed to the dark brown, possibly also due to wanting to contrast Prince's blue eyes. Farah was actually supposed to have an even bigger role in the game. Mechner himself said that only 20% of what was intended for Farah was included in the story, but due to time constraints the team focused on actually making a playable game rather than creating a well-developed secondary character. The team went through many changes in the game's logo. The first few iterations of the logo we see a very basic font used. The logo then evolved to be more stylized and even sported an almost horror aesthetic. The logo then developed into a yellow color to mimic the Sands of Time. And finally we got the blue and yellow logo we see today, combining the Prince's colors and the colors of the Sands of Time. In the beginning moments of the game, the full Sands of Time's lore can be seen on murals. I explained the full lore in my top Sands of Time facts video, so go check that out if you're interested. However, during production something had to be cut after a complaint from Sony. The director Patrice Desilets actually mentions this in this video.
Okay, this one, when you see the
Middle?
red, yeah. At first, because in the, well, this one, in his hand, there's nothing. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, there's like his empty hand. But in the Hindu mythology, he's getting rid of this guy and eats it. So
You couldn't put that in the game?
well, we sent it to Sony, but they weren't happy about it.
Having said this, some versions of the game actually have kept it, like the US PS2 version. All versions of the PC game seems to have cut this. As mentioned in my top Sands of Time facts video, the team initially used a different engine for the game. The engine looked more cartoon-like as it was unable to keep up with the detailed visuals the developers wanted. We actually have some screenshots of this early engine. This is when Prince had his white and red design. Some enemies and characters went through design changes during development. The original colors for the Persian army were red and orange, as seen in these old concept arts. This is also seen in Prince's original design I mentioned earlier. However, later on the designs of all the Persian characters were changed to blue. This decision would be later reverted in Warrior Within and the DS game Battles of Prince of Persia, where the Persian army would once again wear red and orange. This was once again changed in the Two Thrones, where the colors went back to blue. Prince's original sword had a different hilt. This can be seen in different screenshots, as well as for a couple of frames in the E3 trailer. The sword of the Avenging Warrior also had a different design originally. The sword looked like it was made of stone instead of metal. The sword of the Enlightened Warrior also had some red accents instead of golden, as it is seen in the final game. This may have just been for promotion, as there are no other images of this. We know that level design was a key component of development. With that comes changes in areas. We know that the Persian colors were changed from red to blue, so a lot of areas had to reflect that. In the Hall of Learning, we can see that there was a change in layout. This door does not exist in the final build. This bookshelf in the Sultan's chambers was very different. The model for the bookshelf was different, and the dragging speed was also significantly increased. This bridge also had a very different animation when it breaks. Finally, the biggest difference in my opinion is this concept art of the hourglass. We can see that the original idea was for the hourglass to exist on the top of the tower with an open roof. Whilst this was not utilized in the Sands of Time, this area looks very similar to the final area in the Two Thrones. There are some animations removed from the Sands of Time. In the PS2 demo, Prince actually had a wall-running slash attack, which is seen in the later games. Here it is pretty terrible. The attack does not track the enemy at all, and when it does hit, it does the damage of just a normal attack. The amount of patience the attack requires to pull off is not reflected in the damage. Another cut animation is when Prince defeats a slowed opponent. They originally exploded in a red smoke. The final game changes this to yellow to match the color of the sands. In the PS2 demo, the menu animations were very different. Firstly, the color of the menu was more yellowish, and there is a depiction of Prince waiting for us. This could have been removed because this probably took up some of the video memory, and the team had to max it out for the normal game, so using it in the menu wasn't feasible. Prince's health and sand indicators were changed 3 times. The original UI was very simple, and then in the E3 build, the UI was changed to mimic the Dagger of Time. This design was changed again, possibly to make room for sand clouds and health upgrades. In the original demo shown at E3, there was a battle song which is cut in the final game. This song does not even exist in the PS2 demo files. Next is a removed version of Time Only Knows that is a lot slower and is shown in the Sans Beast video. The following cut contents will be quickfire. Originally there was meant to be a catapult in the game. We actually have gameplay of this and it is actually also shown in the original script. Prince would have used the catapult to enter the watchtower. In the original script we see that Vizier may have had some ulterior motives with the dagger. The script shows that the Vizier wanted to be stabbed by the dagger. This may have fulfilled his dream of becoming immortal, much like what happens in the Two Thrones. Here are screenshots showing enemies in areas they shouldn't be in. Originally the statue we climb at the beginning of the game was actually meant to be a statue of a giant elephant, which was probably Ganesha, the god of wisdom and luck in the Hindu religion. This is also shown in this concept art with the Vizier. The Sands of Time was originally supposed to be a PS2 exclusive alongside Beyond Good and Evil as detailed in this IGN article. In the PS2 demo, there is a pathway in the prison that is removed in the final game. This may have been a pathway towards a life upgrade, or maybe it was the original way of entering or even exiting the prison. There are a few sections in the original script which are not present in the final game. There are just a few character interactions that enhance Prince's and Farah's relationship. Pause the video if you would like to read them. So that is it. There may have been some extra cut contents that aren't shown in this video. If you know of any, please leave them in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, please do consider liking. The next big project is Warrior Within Top Facts, so make sure to subscribe to see when that comes out. I may make some smaller videos in between, but most of my focus will be on that.